We only seem to have one observer from ONS, but if they come, they can join us. Welcome everybody to this meeting of the Policy and Resources Committee. This is the first time I've had to do this because we haven't had public in this building and this room for quite a long time. So, but yes, just to let people know, because the members should know this, but the emergency evacuation procedure is that should a fire alarm sound, you all go out of there's a door over here behind that curtain and assemble on the lawn outside. So don't go out that way because there's too many doors to get out easily. So. Okay, moving on. Item 2, apologies for absence. I don't think we've got any apologies.
We have apologies from Councillor Ryedale this evening. Councillor Paul Andrews is substituting.
My mistake. I'd forgotten Councillor Ryedale is still on his rather nice holidays. Item 3, declarations of interest. Do any members have any declarations that they need to make on under the Code of Conduct? Councillor Burr?
Chair, I'm just assuming that you're taking that the county councillors will be on block all the time at every meeting, so we don't have to say it.
No, that makes sense. Councillor Arnold?
I've been lobbied.
Thank you.
On all sorts of things.
I think probably we all have.
That's what I assumed. Nobody said anything, so that's why I stuck my hand up.
No, thank you. Any other declarations? I will declare myself that I'm a member of the declaration on item number 14 in that I am involved with the Norton Skate Park. I'm a member of Norton Town Council as well, so obviously that's been an ongoing discussion there, but that's a personal, non-prejudicial interest. Yeah. Councillor Andrews?
Likewise, from Norton Town Council's point of view.
Thank you. Everybody?
Do we need to declare we've been lobbied? Has everybody been lobbied?
I think probably we'll take that as read because I think probably everybody's had the same letters. So yes, thank you. Okay, moving on. We've now got a whole raft of minutes of the various working parts. Oh, sorry, no, we need to do the minutes of the last meeting first before we move on to those. So you should all have had the minutes of the last meeting. They're in your agenda papers, pages 5 to 10. There are a couple of corrections that we need to note before we approve them. On minute, let me find the right one. In the papers, the figure that was relating to the debt write-off figure, which was on page 148 of Anton's report on this matter, the figure was actually recorded incorrectly. So it says on the papers that the figure is £7,383.11, and it should be £738.11. So that's a difference of £500. So that correction is being made. And there was also a second minute amendment that we need to correct in the minutes. So on minute item 117, which was the exempt information on page 9 of the agenda, the voting record was recorded incorrectly. So instead of listing 4 members as voting for the resolution and 6 voting against, it should be 6 for and 4 against. So those corrections can be made or have been made. I'd propose approval from the chair. If I could have a seconder, please. Thank you. Councillor Burr, I don't know, several hands. Thank you. All those in favour, please show. Okay, thank you. I think that was unanimous. Sorry, Councillor Andrews. Got that. Lovely, thank you. Okay, as I said earlier, I was getting ahead of myself. We have several lots of minutes here from the various working parties. So there's minutes of the Local Plan Working Party on the 9th of March, the Local Plan Working Party on the 29th of March, the Livestock Market Working Party on the 6th of April, the minutes of the Flood Management Working Party on the 26th of April, and 2 further minutes of local plan working party on the 12th of May and the 24th of May. Now, there are no decisions or recommendations from those working parties, so I would propose that we just accept them. I'm assuming members have read them. Unless anybody has any questions, I would propose. Councillor Duncan?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. It was just really to raise 2 things. The first one is in relation to the local plan working parties which have taken place. From what I can gather, it seems as if sites that have been submitted, they've gone to the working party for comment, and individual members have gone through and said whether they like something or don't like something, or whether a village should be developed or shouldn't be developed. I just wanted to raise slight concern in the fact that obviously a lot of the statements that have been made at the meeting and then minuted, they are what I perceive to be just individual members' opinions, some of which relate to private businesses, individual submissions of land. In one case it names an individual family, which I understand they're a vulnerable family, and that's minuted in the public documents. And I have to say I just find it a slightly strange process, and I've not been aware of this before, that councillors would go through submissions individually or talk about villages and say whether they believe it should be developed or not. I understand and believe that the planning process and the development of our local plan should have a degree of sort of objectivity around it, and individual councillors shouldn't be really at this stage be commenting in this forum, and at least not those comments then being minuted and published sort of out there in the public domain, because I think this could open ourselves up to some potentially serious risk of challenge later on in the process. Certainly if my business was being talked about in a set of public minutes, I wouldn't be happy with that. And I was just wondering if there was any explanation as to the logic of going through this process at this stage.
Thank you for that, Councillor Duncan. Philip, could you respond to that, or you were able to respond?
Sorry, yes, I could, Chair, but I think Councillor Andrews was perhaps more involved in that process, if you're able to let Councillor Andrews answer.
Yes, that's absolutely fine. Councillor Andrews?
Yes, Chair. No, the idea was to look at every single site which had been put forward, and to look at every village in Ryedale with a view to familiarising ourselves with the issues involving those sites and those villages, and the intention then was to take that information and that would help us in deciding how we were going to allocate land share. It was not a decision-making process. It was an information process, and it was an opportunity for members to discuss issues that related to particular sites. And I see nothing wrong with that, but I do accept Councillor Duncan's comments in regard to the particular family. I would accept that those should not have been minuted.
Yes, I mean that would be my comment really. Obviously, it's not a decision-making committee, therefore I think it's reasonable for it to be discussing those individual sites, because that seems to be part of the function of that working party. But I do think it's perhaps difficult when individual businesses and particularly families are discussed. So perhaps that working party can be made aware of that, and probably those, I mean, it's already public documents, so there is little point in now removing those names, but I think that needs to be borne in mind for further discussions going forward. Councillor Duncan, do you want to come back?
It was just to say that obviously if I owned a business and there was a comment made which said the shop is not very busy, very few people go there, and councillors are discussing that, I just don't think that's really appropriate. To say a pub has shut and is unlikely to reopen, I don't think there's any basis for that. There's nothing I can see in this paperwork which provides evidence for that assertion. Saying that a village is frequented by a travelling family, I just think is totally inappropriate. And I just think, again, comments which say a council's name, leave it alone, don't develop it, could take a few houses, I don't think there's any basis for those claims, and I just think that we've opened ourselves up to serious risk by going through this process, because if a site is ultimately not allocated or a policy is developed to get a particular outcome, then I'm sure if I was a developer or an interested party, I would cry foul about the process which we've gone through. I think we need to look at the sites, develop a policy, and then sites are allocated from that point. And I think that if there is a plan to go through and do this again, I think that we should be very wary of that. But I've made my point, I think, on that.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Duncan. I mean, I think the other aspect of this is that the public do comment on the sites as well, and are able to say what they want on the different sites. But I do think we have to be very careful in discussing individual businesses and certainly individuals. Councillor Burr.
Yeah, I just want to come in on that one because I think it's obviously looking at the minutes, the committee and members have taken this really seriously, and they are trying to do a thorough job. However, I think us as a council need to be very mindful. You've got to think also about safeguarding of people, and it's not something that really has ever, and I agree with Councillor Duncan on this particular occasion, that this council has ever done. And I'm just wondering if you, as chair of P&R, could maybe, ensure and probably filter it through to all our officers, whatever happens, whether this be the local plan, the livestock market working group, whoever, that we don't talk about individuals and businesses and people and sites, and because that's what we do in these working parties. We discuss and we explore and we do lots of things, but this has come to us with no decision, so you have to base everything on fact. I mean, that's what we do. So I would absolutely agree that we don't want anything like this ever again in our final year to come forward.
Yeah, thank you for that, Councillor Bear, and I will take those comments forward. I mean, on the working parties that I chair or that I sit on, I think we're always very careful with this in this respect of not because some of this, and particularly on the local plan working party, some of it is very commercially sensitive information, and I would be very alarmed, particularly as Councillor Duncan has raised it, for an individual family or for comments to be made around certain groups in society. It's just totally unacceptable, and I wouldn't want this council to be doing that. So I will certainly filter that, send that back, Councillor Burr.
And
do you want to come back?
Yeah, I do want to come back. And could we, as a council, express our autonomy from our officers, that if they are worried about anything like this, because hopefully they are listening to this and they will get some feedback, that they do feel free to come and say, could we have another look at this? Is this something that we want to go out? I think that is necessary.
I would agree, thank you. Councillor Andrews?
Sorry as well, just as I know it has Councillor Paul Andrews on the present at the top, but if Councillor P Andrews could be put just all the way through the minutes with things like that, just, so there's no confusion. Thank you.
Yeah, no, could we make a note of that? Okay, yeah. Councillor Paul Andrews?
Yeah, Chair. I agree with what has been said about the minutes. The minutes should be drafted carefully, but I think it would be very wrong, bearing in mind this is a working party, to try and restrict the conversations that can be had at a working party, because all that will mean is people will get very worried about what they're saying when they're saying it, and it will restrict conversation, and in my view it will not help with the deliberations and on the decisions that have to be made. Thank you.
Councillor Andrews, I don't think anybody's saying we should restrict conversations. I just think people are saying that we should be very careful with regards to those conversations when they name businesses, and particularly when they name individuals or groups in society. I don't think there's any desire to restrict any debate or discussion, but just that for the purpose of the minutes, they should be very carefully worded so that we are not doing that. Councillor Clark?
Just out of interest, are we able to take these things out of the minutes just for anybody that looks at them in the future and, to protect the businesses and people involved?
I think we can look at that. I'd probably need to take advice, possibly from Elizabeth, on that once they've already been published. Elizabeth, do you want to come in here?
Yes, please. Thank you, Chair. These comments should not be made, and people should not be named in minutes. So whilst the working party is free to discuss any such issue that it wishes, the minutes should not record this, and I agree wholeheartedly with the comments made by Councillors Burr and Duncan. In the circumstances, I think the names should be removed from the sets of minutes. Although they have probably been in the public domain and people have probably read them, we should not perpetuate this. So I will ask the officers who have prepared the minutes to remove them. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I think that's a very sensible piece of advice. Councillor Docker?
Could you also remove the names of businesses that have been placed in there and commented on as well?
Yeah,
not just the individuals.
I was
It's just Elizabeth said individuals, but I'm asking that the business names are removed.
I meant, any sort of any written part of those minutes that can identify people, either businesses or people, need to come out. So apologies, Councillor Docker. I meant the whole thing. So thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any further comments? Councillor Duncan?
Not on the same working party, but on the the livestock market working party. There is a project programme, I think on page 46, which talks about a timeline for bringing forward a proposal. And it mentions about August P&R there being a Part A report setting out the project business case and seeking approval to proceed to procurement. I was just wondering if we're still expecting a report to come to that August meeting of P&R, and also in reference to the next point around October. Obviously, all large capital projects now have to go to North Yorkshire County Council's executive for approval, and it was just whether we have had any discussions with North Yorkshire County Council around any project bid which we might prepare.
Thank you, Councillor Duncan. At the moment, I can't actually say whether a report is going to come to the August P&R on this issue. We have a meeting tomorrow with the Fitzwilliam Trust again, because there have been some issues around the agreement with them. So following that meeting tomorrow, we'll probably be in a better position to give you a fuller answer to that. And more than happy to do that once that meeting's taken place. With regards to discussions with North Yorkshire, I think I'd have to pass over to Philip to answer that one.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, in principle, Councillor Duncan, we have flagged this scheme with colleagues at North Yorkshire. It would need to go through a Section 24 process. I think the details of that still need to be determined, but yes, it certainly is on North Yorkshire's radar as a scheme that's of interest to Ryedale, and we'll go to them in due course.
Just following up on that very quickly, I think we've commissioned a line as consultants to do some further work. Obviously, clearly, I think that's coming at some cost, and I was just wondering exactly the costs of the consultancy work, which is ongoing at the moment, and whether we are still commencing with that, given the uncertainties around agreements with the Fitzwilliam Trust.
Just in terms of that, Councillor Duncan, the working party gave officers a very clear instruction not to continue with any work pending agreement of an exclusivity with the site owner. That's one of the objectives of tomorrow's meeting. So the only work that's been undertaken has been work undertaken funded by a third party, not by RDC.
Do we have any further questions, comments on the minutes of the working parties? If not, if we can just accept those as a true record of those with the amendments that we have asked can be made, then we can move on. Okay, thank you. Okay, so item 11 is urgent business, and I have no urgent business this evening. And then we'll move on to Part A items, which are matters to be dealt with under delegated powers or matters determined by this committee. I've made the decision because we have a few people here this evening who have come specifically for item 14 to move that up the agenda. So we're going to take item 14 next. So that is funding for the Norton Skate Park And that's on pages 115 to 122 of your agenda.
Chair, could I just add, just before we start to discuss this item, that this has come about as a consequence of the February full council meeting, where it was determined by council that £50,000 would be allocated to the Norton Skate Park. So it has now been referred to Policy and Resources to take this matter further. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. That's very helpful. Okay, members, so you have the report in front of you, and Amy is here. She's moved quickly and I didn't notice, to present the report to us. Thank you. Thanks, Amy.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I will just give you a brief overview of the report, just before I follow through with the recommendations. So just to make everybody aware that I won't cover the detail in the body of the report, but just to make everybody aware that we did cover conversations with key partners and stakeholders involved to date to ascertain facts and sort of information relevant to the scheme being in question. So the purpose of the paper, as we've already mentioned, is to consider the proposed financial support of up to £50,000 to renovate the half pipe at Norton Skate Park, as per the member proposal at full council in February, and therefore included in the 2022-23 budget. Just want to draw your attention just to maybe a few little points outside of the body of the report. So the first is around that Norton Town Council have already funded the renovation of the 7 smaller pieces at the front of the skate park. The half pipe is the item that's still remaining. Completion of that item would see the whole skate park renovation scheme complete. Just a small note around the rising costs of material and labour that we're seeing at the moment in many projects. So it's just to raise that as a bit of awareness. However, we do understand that there's potentially some in-kind support that might be provided by some of the stakeholders that might help to mitigate some of that risk. As things currently stand, Norton Town Council don't have the funds to support the renovation of the half pipe, so without support it would unlikely to be changed and it would remain in a derelict state for now. The other point, just to perhaps make everybody aware of, is that the site that's currently, the skate park is currently on, has a lease until 2024. So whilst the Norton Town Council are hopeful that that will be renewed, it's not guaranteed. So I'll just move on to the recommendation that officers are making, and it's that funding for the scheme already allocated in the budget be provided to Norton Town Council, but subject to a number of clauses. The first is that RDC has sight of the preferred quote for the work prior to any work being started. The grant's provided on the understanding that all interest groups are consulted and engaged and included in the ongoing development work at the site, and that there's confirmation of any match funding should that be required. As I say, reasons for those recommendations would be that this allocation of funding to this scheme would see the complete renovation of the whole park. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. That's great. So you have the recommendation in front of you, members. Once it's been proposed and seconded, we'll open it up to debate. So I would like to recommend that we go with the officer's recommendation this evening. I hope somebody will second that.
Yeah, I'll second that.
Thank you. Okay. So let's, does anybody have any questions for Amy before we move on to debate? Councillor Joy Andrews.
Thank you. Norton Town Council, are the majority of the council on board with this? Is that something I can ask?
That's not something I have a particular answer to. Maybe
so, sorry, maybe direct that to Councillor.
I think I can happily say, as Mayor of Norton Town Council, we now have support of the majority of the council. Okay.
And just one more, I think it's probably is. I know there's been. I think some councils have been lobbied and information put out there that wasn't necessarily in the report. Will the equipment, is it transferable if the worst were to happen?
Yeah, so my understanding is that the equipment is all movable, so should that site not be there, it could be moved somewhere else. That's my understanding.
And that Norton Town Council would presumably be in support of it going somewhere else in Norton if they could find somewhere.
Yes, they would.
Yeah.
And also, because the land does belong to the Fitzroom estate, they've said that should they at some point require it back, I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon,
No.
but should they would also help in that process of finding another site in Norton.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Burr, were you indicating?
Yeah, I was just going to come back actually to Councillor Andrews' question. First of all, I'd like to declare an interest. I'm on Norton Town Council, and this has been a long, hard slog with the council completely and utterly split 50-50 as a yes and a no, and that's why it's been stuck in the, pardon the pun, pipe for such a long time. There is a brand new council, and the majority of that new council have ratified and said that they are in favour of this. However, I need to bring your attention that there are councillors that still do not want Norton Town Council to move forward. So I cannot tell you that it's 100% majority, because it isn't. But as I say, there is an absolute definite will to move forward with this and stop the bickering, stop the arguments, and just get it done. Just wanted to come back on that point.
That's fine, thank you for that, Councillor Burr. I think probably members can tell from the letters they've received that there isn't 100% support, but certainly with the new council there is more support than there is against. Okay, thank you. Do we have any further questions for Amy? No? Okay, well, we'll open this up for debate in that case. Councillor Arnold.
I'm completely confused about this, really. Some people say it's too tall, some people say it's not tall enough, some people say it's too wide, some people say it needs supervision, some people say it doesn't need supervision, some people say there's only 2 years left. I mean, I have no idea where I am, really, because everything's confusing. And I think, to be honest, in my mind, I'd probably abstain, because I don't know where it's going.
Thank you for that, Councillor Arnold. I think it has been confusing because, and I think the fact that we received the letters literally in the last sort of 24 hours or slightly more from those members of Norton Town Council who've always been opposed to the project, that has confused people further. I think if you look at Amy's report, it answers a lot of the questions. If people want me to answer some others that have been raised by the letters that have come through, I will do my best to do that. But I think the key things that have been raised repeatedly are the safety aspects, and the park has been inspected by ROSPA, who are the Royal Society for Prevention of Accidents, and they are content that this piece of equipment could be refurbished and used safely. And so that's a bit of a red herring, to be honest. And the other issue that has been repeatedly raised is about supervision. And again, there are other half pipes of this size in other areas of the country. One in Peterborough springs to mind, similar size, well, I think exactly the same size, half pipe that is used unsupervised. There is no requirement, and ROSPA again have said it does not need the supervision that some members of the Town Council have called for. I think we've already heard that the equipment could be moved if it was required for that to be. And obviously the other issue that's been raised repeatedly is that over the lease and the land not belonging to the Town Council and it belonging to a local landowner. But that has been the case ever since this project started, just after the 2000 floods, when the land was leased to this council, to the district council, and it has always been on a rolling lease. And the representatives from the Morton and Norton Area Partnership and myself have spoken to the Fitzroom Estate, and they have no immediate plans for that piece of land. It's a very difficult piece of land to develop anyway because it's smack in floodplain. So I think, to be honest, that is a bit a red herring. So, but I'm happy to have a conversation with you, Councillor Arnold, outside this meeting. I'm hoping that we can sort this out this evening, but I'm happy to reassure you and answer any questions you have. Thank you. Councillor Paul Andrews.
Yes, Chair. The half pipe, it was second hand when it was bought, and it was installed with the full support of the police in I think it was 2004, and it was installed with the police's view that if young people had something like this to play around and to challenge themselves on, then it was less likely that they would find other less socially acceptable ways of challenging themselves. It was with Ryedale District Council, I think, until 2013, and there has never been a serious accident there, as far as I understand. It was never supervised by the council, and it was then, and there was then talk of Ryedale getting rid of its responsibilities in order to save money. And on that basis, Norton Town Council agreed to take it over, and Malton Town Council agreed to contribute to the cost of taking it over. Again, everything went fine. The trouble was, no maintenance took place, and eventually it had to be in a state which had to be, its use had to be discontinued. So it has a good record for safety. And it also has the support of the police, who like to see young people challenged in ways which are not socially and which are not antisocial. As you said, it has there's been full consultation with ROSPA all the time, and ROSPA have not said that it is unsafe. They take into account that all sports have a degree of risk attached to them, and the risk is acceptable as far as they're concerned. Which has also been discussed with the insurance company, and the insurance company are satisfied that the arrangements in force are things that they will insure. So therefore we have it. It's a question of the police want it, the local community want it, ROSPA says it's okay, and the insurance company are prepared to insure it. And as far as I'm concerned, the rest is some people being very concerned about personal liability. There is, so long as they're insured, so long as we're seen to be acting in accordance with ROSPA, there is no issue about personal liability as far as I'm concerned. And I would urge this council to support the proposal. And I can say that Malton Town Council did used to support it. They used to give £2,500 every year towards the maintenance and so on. This was discontinued a year ago, and this was just before the last election, and the skate park was brought out as part of the issues of the last election, and we now have a majority on Malton Town Council would support it, and I'm hoping that very soon they will reinstate the £2,500 that we used to pay for maintenance. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews, and probably slightly outside of my remit in this room, but that would be very welcome from Norton Town Council if Malton were to support again in the future, so thank you for that. Further comments from the committee, Councillor Burr?
Say that I am a member of Malton Town Council. And as far as I see this, yes, it's a Norton issue, but it does actually benefit both Norton and Malton residents. But actually it goes far beyond that. It satisfies lots of people in Ryedale and people who want to come to Malton and Norton from out of the area. It's been going on for so long it's untrue at Norton Town Council. And that, I believe, is due to obviously the deep divisions and how you cannot move forward with things. A proposal was made at the full council before the elections, and it was only right and proper that our officers took away and came back with a proposal. At that time, you had a council who was completely split, and if the money had been allocated that night, it probably wouldn't have even got out of the bank account. We have, as has been said, it's been an election debate. It's been something that people have conscientiously voted for, and there is a will in Norton Town Council to move this forward and put this to bed once and forever. With this money, that actually will secure that, and it'll secure that for not only the people of Norton, but, as I say, for the wider community. Everything else is circumstantial and not based on fact. It's people's personal opinions of what they personally feel. The fact is that it's needed, it wants using. It was raised at full council, quite properly debated at full council, quite properly referred back to get a report done, and now we have a new town council. So, in my opinion, bearing all that knowledge in mind, it's something that I would hope all councillors wouldn't be parochial about, and they would probably vote for it and see that as a benefit to the very, very much wider community. And I do mean Kirby Moorside, and I do mean Pickering and the wider community. So I think it's a no-brainer, and we should allocate that money in full.
Councillor Duncan?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I think this is probably the most important meeting so far in terms of the skate park campaign. I think it's important to remember that the campaign started out not really about the other ramps, but about the half pipe, and that obviously was superseded by then the renovation work that had to take place to the other ramps as well. Norton Town Council have agreed that. I think the skate park now looks phenomenal. It's been very well used, and I think everyone welcomes that. So that should be remembered. So the issue now is still outstanding, is the half pipe. I just want to sort of take a bit of a step back. Obviously, I submitted the motion to the December full council meeting asking for this £50,000. It was delayed because that meeting was then cancelled. We then met in February. I was hoping that we could give the commitment then in principle to the £50,000 so that the Norton Town Council had the confidence that they needed to move forward with the campaign. Unfortunately, it was sent here to P&R to look at. I think the recommendation that's come forward, I totally agree with. I have no problems with that. The content of the report, I think, is a good overview of all of the various issues at play. I do think that we could have decided this back in February, but the main thing is that now it is coming forward, and I'm hoping that we can get that approval. I have had a conversation with Councillor Keir as chairman of this committee, and we both agreed that we support this moving forward. And I think that's very important in terms of the Norton community as two Norton councillors. I know that our colleague Councillor Mackenzie is also in full support. So I think that's important to remember that across the political divide we now do have approval for agreement around this proposal. I had hoped it would come forward sooner, but we're now here at this stage, and I think that's important to remember. I just wanted to pick up on a couple of issues, hopefully to help those councillors who do have some concerns. I think Councillor Arnold is right. There are claims and counter-claims around this. We've all had letters sent to us. I think hopefully all councillors are acting in good faith. I think they all want hopefully the best for the community. It's right that we discuss all the relevant issues. However, I think the report that we've got here does go through that overview very well. We have consulted with all of the relevant interested groups, and officers have recommended this for the approval. I think tonight we have an opportunity to sort of draw a line under this in terms of Ryedale's involvement. All of the issues that have been raised around the lease of the land, around health and safety, around usage. Obviously, it's not for us as Ryedale District Council to determine and adjudicate on those issues. It's for Norton Town Council. But by us agreeing this funding this evening, we are now able to allow Norton Town Council to move forward. It's important to recognise that they do not have the funding at this stage to proceed with that renovation of the half pipe, given the costs that they have incurred, that they have contributed towards for the other ramps in the park. So without this, we're going to have that shadow of the half pipe hanging over the remainder of what now is a really good renovated park. So I think it's important that we can agree this, and again that sort of unity is there from Norton councillors, which potentially people might think is remarkable. So I'm hoping that if we can have that agreement in Norton, that other councillors from outside of the district, outside of the town can as well. The request for funding went into Ryedale back in December, and it's really for two reasons. Ryedale District Council did used to own and operate and manage and maintain the skate park. That handover was completed several years ago. I don't think that all of the maintenance work was completed. There wasn't anything like an ongoing grant contribution that was pledged. This was very much given to the town council. The withdrawal of Moulton, I don't think was helpful to that, so they're now having to take on all of the burden and responsibility for an asset that is not just used in Moulton and Norton, but is used much further afield in Ryedale and beyond. So I think it's important for the ownership and also for the taxpayers of Norton that we provide support from the district level. We have, of course, we're aware that Ryedale District Council has not got long left as an authority before we are abolished, and I think it's important that we can pledge this £50,000 as quickly as we possibly can to give that confidence and assurance to the town council. So I'm hoping that tonight we can make this decision as policy and resources, that funding can be there and that it can be drawn upon. The public support is there from all generations, and I hope that we can deliver this final key element in the campaign. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments from members? Oh, Councillor Joy Andrews.
Thank you. I don't totally agree with Councillor Duncan. I'm glad it did have to go through the process, because when you're spending public money, as frustrating and as arduous as it is to go through the whole waiting game, it is £50,000 of everybody's money within Ryedale, and I was a bit nervous about committing that kind of money, knowing that there was a split with Norton. It's so good, and I know you've worked tirelessly with some of your fellow councillors behind the scenes to, I'm sure you'd like to have banged heads together at some point possibly. But I mean, this is something that I personally could support now, seeing the full officers' report, and I know it's a lot of work for the officers as well with all the stuff that's going on, but it has really sort of settled my nerves about it, because once you spend that money, there's the afterwards. It's all very well committing money and isn't this great, but it's the ongoing afterwards, what happens next. And it could have been a major white elephant, and it's not going to be. And so I for one can support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Just to sort of further reassure members, we've already, on the equipment that's in place now, that has just been replaced, got an inspection regime. In fact, the gentleman who's doing that is in the room this evening, who is a volunteer and is doing that on a voluntary basis, but has the skills to do that. And I think the Town Council has a will now to be much more on top of any problems as they come up. And obviously the equipment that's already been refurbished has a guarantee on it, and the work that has one small piece of work that was flagged as being a slight snag has already been fixed. So I think there is a will amongst the Town Council also to just keep on top of it. And yes, there will be ongoing maintenance costs, but I think the community campaign, the involvement of the community in this, the involvement of the Moulton and Norton Area Partnership has illustrated that the community also will be willing to throw the weight behind the ongoing maintenance, and they're talking about plans for running events on there, and keeping what money we might need in the future coming in, so that the maintenance will be less of an issue for the Town Council, hopefully. Councillor Frank.
I don't know an awful lot about skate parks and half pipes. I'm afraid it's my generation didn't have skate parks and half pipes, but I think. If I'm right in saying this, I think at the last Olympics they put a skate, whatever you call it, event into the Olympics. And so I'm all for this, and I really think I can really support this, because I think it's something that youngsters ought to be doing. They ought to be challenging themselves. They ought to be doing something daring and rather than smashing lampposts or whatever. It's a good thing for them. It's a good thing all round. And I would hope to see in the future, I'm not sure whether this half pipe would be at Olympic standard or if they need to be bigger or better or whatever, because as I say, I don't really know an awful lot about these skate parks and the skating. But I would hope to see a youngster in the future in the Olympics that started their career at Norton, and I'm all for it. Let's get on with it.
That's wonderful to hear, Councillor Frank. I think everybody would echo that sentiment. The young lady that did so well for the UK in the Olympics, she was skated on a half pipe, and so yeah, you never know what might come out of Norton or Malton next. So thank you for your kind words.
Kirby or Helmsley, mind.
This is yes, open to all. So this is sounding very positive, members. Are there any other comments that anybody would like to make before I just sum up and then we can take this to the vote? No, it doesn't look like it. Well, I just want to say a couple of things because, as everybody knows, I have been involved in this right from the start. I would like to pay a huge tribute to the sort of campaign group that was set up really for their tenacity and their determination to keep going. I think as various members, Councillor Bird particularly said, this has been a long and painful process. It should have been dealt with much quicker than it has been. But I have to say, Councillor Duncan, if we'd gone through in December, we would still have had the old town council. So I actually think this is a good point because we now have more members of Norton who are supportive of this project going forward. But yeah, regardless of the barriers that have been put into place, I think the campaign group has done an amazing job. They have kept going. They've had knockbacks, but they have kept going, and I think that should be a tribute to them. They've proved that there is community support for this project. They've looked at other sources of funding already. Just to sum up, I think it's an excellent project for us to fund. It'll be a good, lasting legacy for young people, not just in Norton and Malton, but right across Ryedale and further afield, as we've already said. The campaign group also have now shown a great willingness to work with the town council, and that has been a long time coming because of the resistance they've found in the past, but we've moved on from that, and the town council have moved on as well, and we are going to have a new skateboard park committee which will also include members of the campaign group rather than just a council committee. So from a Ryedale perspective, the recommendations ensures that our cash input will be spent wisely and in consultation with that group. So I wholeheartedly recommend the recommendations to you members. I'm really hoping we're going to go on unanimously on this. It's been a long time coming, but I would really urge everybody to vote in favour this evening. Thank you. So can we take this to the vote now, please? Nobody's asked for one. I think just your hands, yeah? The members happy to just indicate by hand rather than do a recorded vote? Yeah. Okay, all those in favour, please show.
Oh, well done.
Wonderful.
Well done, Steve. Well done.
Well done. Okay, I think that is unanimous.
Thank goodness for that.
Yes, exactly.
It's been a long year and a half.
Thank you, members.
It's very much appreciated, so thank you very much.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome to sit and listen to the rest of our deliberations, but do feel free to go and celebrate if you'd rather.
Thank you.
Well, yes, yeah.
If you want to learn a little bit more, come down. We're not there. Cheers, Ty. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Moving back to where we were on the agenda before we move that around. So we're back now on agenda item 12, the appointment of working parties and subcommittees. And Elizabeth is going to present this report for us. Thanks,
Thanks,
Elizabeth.
Chair. Yes, so I'd like to present this report, the appointment of members to working parties and subcommittees of the Policy and Resources Committee. The recommendations are that the terms of reference for the working parties and the subcommittees are contained at Appendix 1, and they are to be approved, and I can advise the committee that no updates have been made to these from previous years, so that they remain the same, and that also members and their substitutes be appointed to the working parties and subcommittees based on the allocation of seats, and this is contained at Appendix 2. If I may refer the committee to page 99 of the report, we have put in the names of members that...
Sorry, Elizabeth, could you just hold on a second? Could we have everybody in the room, please? I'm actually listening to what Elizabeth's saying rather than dealing with other matters. Sorry, I don't mean to be rude, but I just think... But I think it would be polite to Elizabeth not to be on your phone at the same time.
With the greatest respect to you, Chairman, you don't know what I might be dealing with at this stage. I'm fully engaged with the meeting and I'm listening to Elizabeth at this point.
Well, I still think it would be more polite not to be using your phone at the same time. Thank you. Sorry, Elizabeth.
Thank you, Chair. So we just need to approve the terms of reference for those working parties and subcommittees, and also we have 4 vacancies. So when the report was drafted, and just for the final 9 months of the council, we have taken the liberty of putting names in of members who have undertaken these positions before. So we just have a few vacancies that we might be able to receive nominations for today, or otherwise the committee can agree for nominations to come in later, and that they will give us a blanket approval for those just to be fitted in. So if we could just approve the terms of reference, please, and then determine whether we are able to fill the 4 vacancies as detailed on page 99 this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Does anybody have any questions on this for Elizabeth? Councillor Burr?
Yeah, I would just want to, obviously this evening we've talked a lot about the local plan working party, and I see there's 2 vacancies on there, and I suppose it's a question for Councillor Duncan. What about that vacancy of yours, Councillor Duncan?
I'm happy to submit the nomination outside of this meeting if Elizabeth's happy with that.
I'm happy with that. Thank you, Councillor Duncan.
And I know that. Sorry if I could just come back. I know that Joy, you're not the group leader, but are you going to be popping someone in for that vacancy? Do you know?
We're going to discuss it at our next meeting because Councillor Potter is on there anyway.
That's right.
So yeah.
Okay. So thank you for that. Thank you for that, Councillor Duncan. Thank you for that, Councillor Andrews. Because obviously, what I've noticed is that because the group leader is now the chair, he has an automatic right to be on there, and because Councillor Simon Thackeray has been on it and has been so involved, and it's his life, it's his passion, he absolutely thinks about it 24/7. I'm just wondering if this committee would agree that because the Liberal has already got that, if Councillor Simon Thackeray could be on that. If Councillor Duncan is going to have someone from his group, that's absolutely fine. So I didn't know whether you would, you would say, well, that's going to be vacant as well. So my question is, and it's to Elizabeth, and if we are in agreement, if the Liberal would allow Councillor Simon Thackeray to be on that local, plan working party, is that acceptable?
Can we just take advice from Elizabeth?
Yes, thank you.
Joy, before we come in.
Thanks.
Yes, provided that the committee agree, then yes, that is acceptable.
Thank you. I thought that, but I just wanted to make sure. And I just think that, it's not political, it's just he loves it, as you all know.
Oh. Thank you.
Which are we referring to?
It's the local plan working party.
The group leaders don't have an automatic right to be on there.
No, but it's chair of planning.
Yeah. So I don't understand the point that you're trying to make. You want the Liberals to give up a seat for a member of your group?
Yes, I think that's what Councillor Burr's asking. But I don't think it's fair for Councillor Andrews to respond to that.
No, it isn't. But I was just going to say,
She did say that
in terms of,
yeah, I was just going to say when we were all on the oh gosh, the big building in the middle of Milton Rooms.
Yeah,
we were on the Milton
Rooms
Rooms working party, and I don't think that was. Anybody could have gone to that. We had it as an open, so you can actually go to the working parties, can't you? I'm looking at Councillor Duncan here. Yeah, I thought anybody could go and have input, because it's not a decision-making body. But maybe I've got mixed up. Thank you.
yeah, no, I think that was probably my understanding because they also don't have to be politically proportional. So, but Elizabeth, could you offer further advice on that? Can any member attend the working parties?
Yes, they can. And in terms of the terms of reference for the local plan working party, the size and membership is determined by the Policy and Resources Committee. So if committee was so minded, they could add another person on, or just anyone can go to them. So this is up to the committee to decide this.
Okay, well, because that may be the easiest solution.
So
Councillor Burr?
So if I could come back, it actually makes quite a mockery of us even having this, because it's all politically blah blah blah. You're just saying anyone can go, so that's fine, and I don't mind how we do it. So would this committee agree that Councillor Thackeray could be actually on that list?
So that's your proposal.
Asking you for.
Yes, I mean,
you.
Yeah. Okay. I presume you will need a seconder for that proposal, Councillor Burr. Councillor Andrews, you're happy to second that?
Thank you.
I don't know if other members want to make comments. I mean, from my point of view as a chair, I think that's perfectly acceptable. I think they are working parties; they're not decision-making bodies. So I see no problem with them having other members involved. And certainly on occasions, on some of the ones I've been, others have been invited along. So I don't have a problem with this, but happy to take views from others.
Controversial, but it's just because as a council we have it all in a little box, all neat. It says, political groups, etc., which is a sham because anyone can go. But if we're doing it that way, that's fine. I understand it. Please, could you be on the list?
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Does have any comment to make on this? If not, I think we can hopefully agree by general affirmation that we'll say that Councillor Thackeray can join this committee, this group. Yeah?
Thank you.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you. So with that slight alteration, I don't think it really actually alters your recommendation at all, Elizabeth. We can look at the recommendation. I'm happy to propose that from the chair. Do I have a seconder for that? Oh, sorry, Councillor Duncan, did you want to?
I was just wanting to propose, obviously we determine I don't know if we've gone to the final recommendation or not, Chairman, but I would like to propose that the livestock market working party is deleted from this list. I feel that we're now at a stage whereby every decision needs to be taken by this committee if we're going to hit the very tight deadlines that have been put forward. And I do...
I think the live stream's not working, and somebody said it's frozen. I just wanted that.
Okay.
Okay, we'll just have a couple of minutes then while we get the live stream sorted again.
It's their end, Joy.
Okay, so it is still functioning. Yeah. Okay.
Sorry,
Okay.
it's just to propose that, because I do feel that we're now at a stage whereby if we want to really progress this project forward, and I think everyone knows that I have and continue to have extreme doubts that this is ever going to come forward as a proposal, but I feel that as a committee we're very much in the dark at this stage as to what's actually happening. Although working parties do not have decision-making powers, it is stated several times within the minutes that there has been a clear steer, or something has been decided, or it was approved that expenditure has been incurred as a result of decisions made by this working party, and I do feel that actually that issue and also the separate issue, which is those people who really want to see this move forward, I don't think this working party is going to achieve that. I think we need a proposal bringing forward for approval to this committee and then make a decision on from there.
I'd like to respond to that. I actually think the working party is serving a good purpose. I think it's not true to say that decisions have been made at that working party, because we're all very aware that it is not a decision-making group. My view is that working parties should be perfectly within their remit to offer a clear steer to officers to move projects forward. And I think the delays that we've had around the livestock market project have been nothing to do with any issues within the working party. We update the working party on what progress has been made, but the delays have been very much elsewhere. And I just don't agree at all. I think this working party, like all our others, does serve a good functioning purpose, and we should retain it until such time. I'm not saying that I'm not in favour of a report coming to this committee as soon as possible, because we all want that to happen in order to get the project over the line, or those that are in favour of the livestock market.
I'm happy.
But I think
I'm happy to withdraw my proposal if you believe, as chairman of this committee, that it is worthwhile for us to still convene this working party using a great officer resource and member resource at this point. If you still believe that we can deliver a proposal that's going to come forward in a timely fashion, then I'm happy to withdraw my proposal to remove this working party. So my proposal is no longer on the table.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that, Councillor Duncan. And as I said earlier on in the meeting, we will have more information, hopefully, following the meeting that is happening tomorrow. Thank you. Do we have any further comments, questions? If not, we will. I think I would propose that we take the recommendations that we have in front of us and agree this by general affirmation, unless anybody has any severe objections to that. We're happy to take this by general affirmation? Thank you. Sorry? Who seconded the recommendation in the first place? Was it you, Councillor Andrews? I think it was. Yeah. Thank you.
That was for Councillor Thackeray to be on it.
Oh, right. Okay. So the original...
But I'm quite happy to second the main motion as well, Chair.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Okay. Thank you for that. Moving on, item 13, the Revenue and Capital Budget Monitoring Draft Outturn for 2021-22, which Anton is going to present and is on pages 101 to 114 of your agenda. Anton, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. So this is the annual draft outturn report, which gives details of the financial position for the Council for the last financial year. Before I go into a little bit, not too much detail, but a summary of the revenue and the capital sides to this, just again to emphasise it's draft, subject to audit. Generally don't expect much change to this at all, but these are the draft accounts we're intending to submit to audit once we've finalised the accounts themselves. So, two parts to it, revenue and capital. I'll deal with revenue first. As with capital, it's a factual statement showing the draft outturn position. The outturn position for revenue is a small underspend of £10,000. Now, I should say that that sounds very comfortable, and it is, and it is something that we've been highlighting throughout the year, that we've probably come in or just under. So that's good. I'm pleased about that. But I don't want to downplay the volatility that we've seen in the budget over the past year. We've still been dealing with the impact of COVID, not so much the outbreak itself, but various cost pressures arising from that. everyone in this room will be aware of the inflationary pressures that we're seeing. We've added to that, we've got LGR and general, I suppose, general position in the employment market, where we're starting to see quite a number of vacancies. So if I were to sum this up very and almost too simplistically, we're seeing some underspends caused by vacancy and staff costs. They're being matched by some overspends on some of the costs we've got, largely due to inflation. Not entirely, but largely. We've also not had to use all of the COVID money that you set aside in the budget 15, 16 months or so ago. There's £788,000. We've used a large chunk of that, but actually because we've had additional grant funding from central government, and also we've been able to reclaim some of the lost income through the government, it means we've not had to use as much of the reserve as we planned. So that's good because it remains within reserves. So it is a context of a difficult year with significant volatility, and we are still seeing some impact. And you can see that if you look in the appendix, you can see the variances where there are overspends and underspends. So I'm probably labouring this too much, but £10,000 is a good outcome. But within that figure, there are pluses and minuses, frankly. That's on the revenue side. On the capital side, the position is, again, slippage in the capital programme. So of the £12 million, we spent just over £3 million. Largely, that is down to a number of projects. Some of them, frankly, we didn't think, even at the early stage of last year, like the livestock market, we weren't going to spend the £1.5 million last year. Other things like the Pickering starter units being delayed in terms of what we originally thought. Again, the pandemic's had an impact on capital spend and capital planning. The risk with that, of course, and I should point this out, the risk of that is that where projects are delayed, the inflationary position within the building sector, pressures there are significant. So although we've not spent the money and we can carry it forward to spend it, and I should say as well, where we've not spent the money, other than the livestock market, which is slightly different, then things like the Pickering starter units and others, then that's already been agreed through the Section 24 process and the general consents that the County Council approved a few weeks ago. So significant slippage in the capital programme. That then has an impact on our reserves because most of our capital programme is funded from reserves. So reserves have really only dropped by about £1 million. But again, as I say in the report, quite a lot of that is earmarked for the capital programme, and also because we have ongoing deficits, although the council will end as of next March. The final thing to say is that when we do the accounts, the format of that is a bit different. You're able to see better, for example, entire services. These are management accounts, which we nerdy accountants call done on a subjective basis. So you see things like employment costs, premises costs, and so on. When you get the accounts, you'll be able to look at to see, for example, how much has street scene spent by, how much has a particular area, how much have we spent on this service and that service. So that comes at that stage. But overall, the position won't change. Apologies, that's probably a bit of a lengthy explanation of where we are. Happy to take questions. Happy to take back any detailed questions you might have about some of the figures as well, and more than happy to send on more details to you of individual areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Anton. I don't think that was too lengthy. I think it was an excellent explanation of where we are at this point. So thank you. Do members have questions for Anton? Councillor Docker?
Yeah, I've got one. It relates to the waste management, and I don't know if you've been copied into the emails that Simon Thackeray's done and the research he's done on the Airbnbs not being charged for their waste because if there were houses, those have been converted into Airbnbs, so they're not paying council tax. and he's listed a whole list of properties that are getting their waste collected, because if the bin is on the street, the bin men take it. And so it's whether that's going to be looked at, and that income, the commercial waste is going to be charged, or they're going to start being charged for the waste, which obviously would help the deficit on that. Thank you.
I'm aware of it, but only just this afternoon when we were having a discussion in the office about it, and I think we are going to look at it, aren't we?
Yeah,
right.
Sorry.
Do you want to come?
Just come on. Yeah, so in the financial strategy, that was part of the audit part of the work that we did, because a lot of the businesses did change from private rented to Airbnb. So that piece of work's been done just now. We have liaised with Elizabeth also about possibly coming to overview and scrutiny. We have a report coming later on, so it has been looked at and it will be kind of coming back. Okay. Sorry, Andrew.
Thank you, Margaret. Do we have any further questions? Councillor Joy Andrews.
A silly one, probably. The livestock market and the money that's been put aside, some of that, was that Section 106 money, some of that? And if that doesn't get developed, does that go back to the Fitzwilliam estate, or whichever one it is?
My understanding, and Philip will correct me if I'm wrong, is that the 1.5 or 1.65, I think, in the end, that we're putting in from reserves, there's also a contribution expected of 500,000 from Section 106. It's a good point, actually, on the Section 106, and it's something we're looking at. Because the capital programme has delayed, we just need to ensure that we're not at risk of losing Section 106 money because of that now. We're looking at that at the moment, and we'll come back, or we'll try and speed up if we can. But it's been an odd couple of years in terms of spending right across the country, so it's not an unusual position.
Thank you, Councillor Clark.
I'm just trying to understand, and it's again probably a silly question. On section 5.2, you've got a table with a blue heading along the top. You've got a budget and then an actual. I'm presuming that's what's been budgeted and then the actual spend. It's on page 102 of our papers.
Yeah, that's right. So, and it's a very consolidated version of it. Probably the better thing to do is the appendix, which then has a similar. So the first column is how much we set aside to spend in some areas, or thought we would receive an income, and then the actuals, what we actually got.
And variance is presumably the difference between the two.
That's correct, yeah.
So why doesn't that add up, or is that just because this has all been rounded in a lot of times?
Yeah, the two different ways of pronouncing it, but both the this table and also the appendix, you'll see that the very bottom figure is -10, which means a surplus. So we've spent £10,000 less than we thought we would achieve. Yeah. But the best way to look at it probably is that appendix where you can see how much we set aside for employees, how much we actually spent, for example, and the difference. And all those differences add up to £10,000 under.
Right, okay. So it's a very concise table, and it doesn't add up because everything else is rounded in. It actually does, but yeah, right. Okay.
But you'll be pleased to know that our full set of accounts runs to about 120 pages, so very happy to take you through all of that.
That sounds a very enjoyable process.
Excellent bedtime reading, Councillor Clark. Do we have any further questions for Anton? No? Okay, so you have the recommendations in front of you. Note the contents of the report and the draft surplus balance of 10k, which has now been transferred to the General Reserve. And that we approve a carry forward of 242,000 from revenue budgets and 7.56 million from the capital programme to ensure that the key projects that are still on our books can be adequately resourced and completed. Happy to propose that from the chair. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Would anybody like to debate this, or can we agree this again by general affirmation? It is for information largely, and just approving this, the part little 2. Okay, so we can approve this by general affirmation? Yes, yes, lovely. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Okay. So moving on now to part B items on the agenda, matters to be referred to council. And the first of those is agenda item 15, the Norton College AstroTurf replacement funding request, which is on pages 123 to 132 of your agenda. And Amy is going to present this one as well. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you, and good evening again. As the chair. Oh. So, thank you. So, yes, as we indicated, this is a paper regarding the replacement of the Norton College AstroTurf and the funding request received. This paper was prepared directly in response to a direct approach to the chair of P&R from Norton College to request this funding. I won't go through the full detail of the report, but I will just give it a short summary and identify a few sort of key areas that I think would be of interest to members before I move on to the recommendations. So just to provide a small amount of background, Norton College currently has an AstroTurf facility within the school grounds, but it has been confirmed to be in a poor state of repair by an external company that went in to assess it. The college have been provided with an estimated cost for the replacement of this and have expressed, and as outlined in the report, the current difficulties faced by the college for their sort of educational provision and sort of like that extracurricular activity as well. They've also expressed a will for use of the facility by the wider community, although no detailed plans are yet in place for that. Again, a couple of things probably to note for members are, once again, the increasing sort of costs and price fluctuations, which are a feature of many schemes. And again, this project's no exception. Whilst they've got an estimated cost, that it is an estimated cost, and things do change quite rapidly. This is a request to utilise RDC's allocate current pot of SIL funding. There needs to maybe be some consideration about supporting individual requests from this pot. Should this one be considered tonight, that may result in an increase in requests from other organisations and groups across Ryedale looking to secure that funding. Kind of on the flip side of that, we have this pot of SIL funding available at RDC, but at this point, obviously, given the point that we're at in the new council coming in March next year, we're unsure yet of where the remaining SIL funds would be utilised within the new council. So we don't know whether they would be ring-fenced for Ryedale purposes, or what was Ryedale, or they would go into sort of a general single pot for use across the area. Norton College has indicated that they are in a position where they currently don't have the financial resources to complete the project themselves. So should funding not be approved, there would be no AstroTurf facility within the college. It may be also to note that the college actually is an academy and within a trust, and as they are outside of local authority control, they do have greater freedom than state schools over various aspects of their running and operation, including their finances. And then finally, maybe for members to note that the funding for this scheme is not on RDC's forward plan for 22-23, and therefore not in the budget. And obviously, as a request in excess of £100,000 of revenue funding, it would need to go through the North Yorkshire County Council Section 24 approval process as well. So just to move on to the recommendations. So the request is for up to £108,000 of funding towards the total project cost, the remaining 10% to be provided by the college. And we're requesting that members advise whether they wish to proceed with financial support for the scheme. So the funding of up to 90% towards the total cost. Provision of a grant is subject to that 10% match funding from the college. The provision of a community use plan, and completion within the current financial year. And then the third recommendation is that that sort of the approval of those things would be delegated to the programme director and the chair of policy and resources, along with the section 151 officer. So I hope that sort of gives a brief summary of the paper to date. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Yeah, it's a long and complex, another long and complex report, really, with lots of different strands. So thank you again for your hard work on the reports that we've had this evening. Do members have any questions for Amy? Councillor Paul Andrews.
Yeah, Amy, I'm getting a bit confused. Do I understand that even if we have SIL monies, North Yorkshire still have to approve it if it's in excess of £100,000?
That is my understanding. Anton might correct me, but
I mean, I think that's absolutely outrageous. And the second thing is, do I understand correctly that if North Yorkshire decide to, after this the council closes, they can take money which has been gathered for a particular development anywhere in our district and spend it anywhere else on the opposite side of the county?
I think, from my perspective, I think at this time, I think it's unclear as to how that will work. I think there are no answers.
Is that the law?
I don't know about the law.
Well, perhaps Elizabeth could advise, because if it is, it's absolutely preposterous, and I'll start writing articles about that. I should quite enjoy doing that. Elizabeth, is she not? Oh, she's not here.
No, Councillor Andrews. I don't know the answer to that, so like you, I would have to go and research it. I can do that and then update everyone, but for now, I'm not sure.
Could you please?
I have to say I completely agree, Councillor Andrews. I mean, to have to put money that has been raised in Ryedale through development, through a process at the county at this stage anyway, and then have no certainty of what's going to happen to anything that's left over, it's appalling. I think it's not acceptable at all. And yeah, I have, obviously I was aware of that in this report, but yeah, it just does not sit right with me either, that this money, when it's development money, has to go through the county. Thank you. Do we have any other questions? Councillor Arnold, I think you were indicating. Oh, sorry, my apologies. I've got eyes all over the place. I need somebody to spot people for me.
Yeah, my first question.
Sorry,
my first question was, I think you answered it. It's coming from the central pot, if you like, the Ryedale pot, rather than the Norton SIL.
Yes, I understand.
And how much money? Can we ask that question? How much money does Norton have in its SIL fund at the moment, or is that?
I'm not aware of a figure for Norton's SIL funds in particular. I'm sorry.
Right.
Sorry.
Okay, I just wondered why it was coming out the central and not out the Norton one, but that.
I'm not sure. Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Councillor Burr.
Well, I'd like to also say that it's disgraceful that our money...
Can you put your microphone on?
I also think it's disgraceful that we've got to ask how we spend our money that has been actually raised. And I don't know if councillors on the executive, he might be able to, Councillor Duncan, he might be able to help us, but I'm not aware of all this, but he might know more about it. But I understand you're in a new position, you probably don't. So there's no pressure there to even answer that. So yes, I would like to follow on from Councillor Andrews, what is she saying, and if you maybe can't answer that, maybe Anton could maybe answer that, as to how much money have we actually got in this pot, or isn't the money in this pot, Anton, or because I'm just wondering about setting a precedent and thinking about all the other AstroTurfs that are in, our area. So I suppose it's over to you, Anton.
I think actually that it's 3 million, isn't it? I think the report says that there's 3 million of SIL.
Yeah, I think we just wanted it to come out of your mouth. Thank you.
Councillor Arnold.
Thank you, Chair. I'm assuming that SIL's not like 106. There isn't a Norton pot. It's a Ryedale pot. Is that true, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
it. Yeah,
it's
not a selected for Norton. It's Helmsley's as well. This funding, this 106 funding, this SIL funding, if it doesn't go to them, it'll get sucked back and maybe go somewhere else. So that's logically, we might as well let them have it, and then it doesn't go to somebody else. That's my way of thinking, anyway. This Academy, is it part of a group of academies, or is it an individual? Because a lot of schools are academies, but there's 5 or 6 of them.
Yes. sorry. My understanding is that it is an academy as part of a trust, but they are the only college within that trust. So it was a trust of one.
I'm just assuming if it's part of a big academy, why aren't they paying as well? Why should we pay for it?
As I say, my understanding is it's a trust of one, the one college.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Duncan?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to respond just to Councillor Burr's question and a couple of points that have been raised around, obviously, the approval process now for funding. Obviously, it's been mentioned that it's a disgraceful situation that this has got to happen, but I think it's the only logical way at the moment that this the situation we find ourselves in, because otherwise councils are going to be making decisions which are going to potentially cumulatively adversely affect the future fortunes of the council, which is going to serve the residents which we're all here to serve. So I think it's right that there is some sort of protocol and process in place. The county council has, as far as I understand it, actually been much more lenient than it otherwise could be. If it had stuck extremely strictly to the legislation, almost every element of expenditure, including day-to-day procurement, revenue expenditure, would have to go for approval to executive, which is clearly unworkable. I think that's been recognised, and their sort of halfway house arrangement has been secured. That was with the agreement of the district and borough council leaders, who were actually extremely grateful for the county's decision to be much more lenient with their decision making. I think there is something that is a problem here, and I think there is a bit of a scandal, and that is the fact that Ryedale District Council is sitting on a pot of £2.9 million of infrastructure funding with all of the challenges which we have got, yet there has been no effort, as far as I can see, and I think that's been confirmed, to draw up a scheme to agree expenditure of that £2.9 million. And we, as members of this council collectively, not North Yorkshire County Council, but this council, has allowed ourselves to be in this situation where £2.9 million of developer contributions for Ryedale are now going to go to North Yorkshire County Council. So I think we need to look at ourselves much closer to home, the decisions or lack of decisions which we have taken, rather than blaming North Yorkshire County Council at this stage on this particular point. I do have a couple of questions, which is, obviously, we're now in the situation where we've got this £2.9 million. We can say we haven't got the resource to draw up a scheme. We're going to make no attempt to draw up a scheme. Therefore, we are going to allow individual requests to come forward, and we're going to deal with them on a case-by-case basis. The downside of that is clearly we're not taking a strategic view. We're just looking at one application, other application after that. If this is successful, other applications may follow, which means we may well have further requests, and that £2.9 million, there might not be much left of it by the time we get to actual vesting day for the new North Yorkshire Council. So we're in a bit of a sort of tricky situation, I suppose, but I suppose my question is around this actual request and the justifications for this request. I think I'm right in thinking that Norton College have not had any funding from this council for sports facilities, whereas other schools, with the exception, I believe, of Ryedale School, have had either capital or ongoing revenue contributions to leisure facilities that are sited on the school grounds.
Yes, just to follow on from that, I'm aware, obviously, we've provided financial input to the Malton Community Sports Centre at Malton School, and obviously Lady Lumley's in Pickering, but the other two secondary schools, I don't believe, have had any sort of financial investment for sports and leisure.
Yeah, so I think the point I'm trying to make is that on that basis, that it is a justifiable request, I think, that those other two secondary schools have for Norton College to make this request. I suppose just the other question that I did have, which has been raised with me directly, which is around delivery of this scheme. And I understand that there is a potential risk that if the AstroTurf needs re-levelling with sand, that the actual total cost of the scheme will be something in the order of £170,000, or that's the contribution, which will be 90% of that, which we would need to make. And the reason I raise that is that if that is required, which is unlikely, but if it is required, if we were to agree to £108,000, then, and that was required, actually there'd be no point of us agreeing that, because the school doesn't have the resources to actually deliver the scheme. So I would just like to, I don't know if I need to make a formal request within the wording, or if that could be taken on board prior to council for a further conversation with the college, just to check that this is enough money and further funding is not required to enable this scheme to progress.
Can you respond to that, Amy?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, more than happy to take that into account. The figure in the paper was based on the figures that the college have provided to me. Other figures are sort of maybe real estimates, whereas the figure provided in the application is the sort of the estimate provided by the potential supplier or the company that would help them do that. So that was the only tangible figure I had to go on, hence why it's in the paper.
That 108 is from the college or from an estimation we've sought of what this sort of work would cost?
The 108 is 100. The estimate that the college have had that they've sent to me was for £120,000. They can provide, or whatever it was, but they could provide 10%, and the 90% would come for us, and that was £108,000. If that makes sense.
Thank you.
I think Councillor Arnold was before me.
Right. I saw Councillor Andrews indicating as well, but Councillor Arnold.
Slightly deviating, but this pot of SIL money that none of us know anything about, by the sound of it, is there a criteria for applying for it? Any specific criteria?
No, there's no specific criteria. This approach was made by a direct letter to the Chair of Policy and Resources, and I believe to the Norton members as well.
Because many moons ago, I asked if there's any SIL money to re-roof our village hall, and I was told there wasn't any. And this is a while ago.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I can't comment on
No,
information we were given previously, sorry.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Burr?
So, obviously, thank you, Councillor Duncan, for setting out your view of why you think that actually we've had something lenient being put on us, but I completely disagree with how in this next year we are going to have to ask about what we do. We've got to remember that Norton College has decided to become an academy and manage its financial affairs, and it got a payout from North York County Council when it decided to not be part of that family. We gave money to Malton School, and that is still part of that family. Having said that, to say that Councillor Duncan, you think it's a disgrace that we haven't spent the 2.93 million, I was laughed out of the council chamber in the Milton Rooms when I stood up, and I think it was probably by yourself, that when I said we should spend local money on local people, and we'll get the, we'll go through the recording of that. And it is a disgrace, that's one thing I will agree with you, it is a disgrace that we haven't been able to spend this money, because it's been raised from this area and needs to be kept within this area. Now, the points that were discussed were it's all going to be put to North York County Council and we'll get this money back anyway. There's no absolute fact that £3 million will be spent on Ryedale. That is absolutely factual evidence that will not be spent. But if we as a council decided to do something, we could determine our destination of how that money is to be spent. So this application has come forward, and there's nothing wrong with that, because if you don't ask, you don't get. But what is worrying me is exactly really what Councillor Arnold is saying, is that I think that we should spend that money, and if we have to go several times up to North York County Council and ask, then so be it. But I think that we should, look at all ways of how we can spend this money. I personally don't care really whether Norton hasn't had any money or has had any money. If it's for recreation, if it's for sport, then I will be supporting it. But my question at the end of this is, and I don't know if it's directed to you, because obviously it's a difficult one. I don't want to put you in a position at all. So please, if you can't answer it, just say, are we saying that if we recommend this for approval, we will consider other applications similar to this? Because I'm worried that the door is going to be opened, which is great, and I will have my wish that £3 million will be spent in Ryedale. Thank you.
Yeah, just to try and answer some of those points, Councillor Burr, I think the point around not having a SIL policy is actually very well made, and it's remiss and unfortunate that we don't have that policy. But in a terrible phrase, we are where we are now. So clearly, the paper in front of you is for members to make a decision on this particular project.
Yes.
I think you're right. I'm aware, and Amy are aware of maybe another 3 or 4 applications either in the pipeline or coming forward with similar kind of requests. There may be others following on from that.
Yes.
You know, members will make your own decision on this particular scheme. There will be other schemes no doubt coming forward as well, and they will be brought to yourselves for your political decision in due course. So I say it is unfortunate we don't have an overarching policy, but we are probably going to have to deal with these schemes now on a scheme-by-scheme basis over the next 9 months or so.
And if I could just come back, sorry, councillors. Thank you. And actually, this coming to the forefront tonight has actually opened up the can now, councillors, so we can, you know, encourage people to put bids forward.
Obviously, members will do whatever they think is appropriate. What I would say is a really serious point is getting this particular report to this stage has taken a huge amount of officer work, and the more projects we get, the more work and the more resource that's going to take. And in the absence of additional resource, then that will obviously inevitably take away effort, time and energy from your other priorities. So that just needs to be borne in mind as well.
And if I could just come back to you, thank you so much for that. But I think £3 million in Ryedale would be really, really good. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bird. Councillor Andrews?
Yes, Chair. I'm glad Councillor Duncan has been converted to the idea of spending our money locally, because I too remember being laughed at when I made the suggestion. And I would also like to remind members of a certain resolution that was taken at the last meeting, last council meeting, when it was decided to take away money from one applicant and to convert it into a council pot. So because people were afraid that it might be spent in Moulton, and that was £160,000 for the Milton rooms, when in fact that money, from what we're hearing, there's so much money available that there's no need to take the money away. There were two that you could simply have added it on and had another pot. Why was that money taken away? And coming back, going on for that point, Chair, we've had a request tonight from Norton Town Council to pay £108,000 as that. And I understand that the officers had prepared a full report on the £160,000 for the Milton rooms. And in those circumstances, Chair, could I ask that now we're aware that we have all this money and that we have to ask North Yorkshire permission to spend it, and it's going to take some time to get it up to North Yorkshire and get it back again, but we have that report. Can we say that not just this report, but that report should also be brought forward at the next meeting of Policy and Resources? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Yes, I am aware that that report was written prior to the change of direction at the annual meeting, and I'm happy to discuss that with officers and the potential for bringing that back. Councillor Duncan, your name was mentioned, so I'm sure you'd like to reply.
It was just to clarify, as it's been stated that I've laughed at people. I'm not aware of any time I've laughed at somebody. I don't know if that's been used in a literal sense or not, but claims have been made about things that I'm supposed to have done, whereby when you watch recordings, there's no actual evidence of those things actually happening. And so just wanted to make that point to clarify on this recording right now that I have, as far as I'm aware, not laughed at anybody in a council meeting. It's been mentioned that I am saying now that we should have spent this £3 million and that we should now spend £3 million no matter what. I mentioned that it was a scandal and it was a disgrace, not that we hadn't spent the money, but the fact that we hadn't drawn up a policy so that that money could be spent in a fair, equitable and effective way. And that is why we're now in a situation whereby for many members we're learning for the first time that we've got around £3 million we didn't even know we had it, and also learning that we didn't have a policy. And I'm just making a general point, and Philip's, I think, agreed that it's an unfortunate situation, but we can't do anything about it. So we're now at the point where we have to make a decision. We either say we're not going to spend any money because we're worried about speculative applications coming forward and being flooded with those, or we're saying on a case-by-case basis we're going to look at those applications and see if they're sensible. In the context of all of this, we have to remember that those requests over £100,000 will have to be made by the executive or officers of North Yorkshire County Council. So in effect, we're very much, and I say this as a member of the executive of North Yorkshire County Council, we're very much in their hands collectively as to the approach that they might take to us and other councils that might decide to spend pots of funding like this. But I have to make that point. I am not saying that we should spend taxpayer money just to spend it. We need to make sure that we are making decisions in the same way as we always would have done around the effectiveness, the value that those projects are going to deliver for our residents.
Thank you, Councillor Duncan. I would hope that no members would suggest that we would just be spending the money for the sake of spending the money, but there will be projects like this one that we have before us this evening that are very worthwhile and that will deliver real results for Ryedale while we're still in existence. And I appreciate it is added to the workload of officers, and we maybe need to look at sort of capacity issues around that. But I do think it is important that we use this money where we can, because we have no guarantee that it will be spent in Ryedale once Ryedale no longer exists. So I have to say I agree with you, Councillor Duncan. I've heard the discussions and been involved in the discussions about the Section 24 approvals process, and I think it probably is more lenient than it could have been, and I think that is helpful. But as I said earlier, I do have a real problem with our SIL money having to be approved by the county at this stage, and I hope those county councillors amongst us will take that forward. Yes, other projects that we have on our books, I can understand that, but the SIL money, I do not believe we should be having to do that. With regards to the policy, not having a policy on this, as Philip has already said, we are where we are, and I think we will have to look at anything that comes forward to us on a case-by-case basis. But we have an excellent report in front of us, and I have no doubt that we will get other excellent reports explaining the pros and cons of any other project that comes forward. And as members, we can judge those on their merits or otherwise. So, thank you. Councillor Graham.
Thank you, Chair. Just for what it's worth, I just wanted to say what my opinion is at this point, having listened to all the debate and the earlier debate we had. And quite honestly, if we are prepared to pour £50,000 into a skate park, I think we morally ought, to be supporting a sports facility which is much needed for an educational establishment. I think it's a no-brainer.
Thank you, Councillor Graham. I couldn't agree with you more. Councillor Dockra?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify something that Councillor Andrews said. When I put forward the motion for the 160,000 to remove it from the Milton rooms and to go to the rural communities. At that point, we had no idea that there was obviously this money, because we've only found out about it tonight. And it's been disproportionate. Throughout the time I've been on this council, the amount of money that's spent outside of Malton and Norton has been disproportionate. The villages, the rural communities do not get their fair share. The village halls do not get the help they need. And I think, so it's fine and dandy to say that I took that money off the Milton rooms, but that was without our knowledge of this. And it has been unfair. And that was 160,000 that has gone to, or will go to, rural communities, as opposed to one centre in the middle of Malton.
Thank you, members. Can we perhaps stop revisiting what's happened in the past and actually move forward on this evening? Councillor Frank.
Yeah, I'm not against this. I think that sport in all walks of life is important, and it's obviously important for people's mental health and everything, and their physical health and mental health. and I'm not against this, and it's for this academy, but somewhere in this report, and I couldn't tell you which number it says, it's for the general public outside school hours. That needs to be well and truly tied up so that the general public get access to this facility outside school hours in the evenings and whatever, so that sport generally can be played on it, so that the general public in Ryedale get access to it and are able to use it. That needs to be well and truly tied up. The other thing that I find it a bit strange that we talk about the money we have here in Ryedale and that it's all going to go to this new council and nobody in Ryedale is going to get anything, blah, blah, blah. Actually, I bet every other council, the other 7 councils, will all more than likely be in the same position or will have pots of money that they haven't spent. So therefore this money will go into this new pot and for this new council to spend, and there's nothing to say that it won't come back to Ryedale or that Ryedale won't get its fair share of it. I think we're tending to panic about where money's going to be spent with this new council, and I would hope that this new council are fair and fair with all the areas, because it'll be a huge area for them to sort out, and I would hope that every area gets its fair share of a huge pot of money from all the areas. It won't be just Ryedale's money, it'll be everybody's money, and it should be shared out among all the different areas of North Yorkshire. We're going to be a North Yorkshire Council, and I really hope that a North Yorkshire Council can be fair. I think Keane said fair and equitable, and I would really hope that that's what happens, that this money not necessarily all comes back to Ryedale, but is spent in appropriate areas where everyone in North Yorkshire can use the facilities.
Thank you, Councillor Frank. I think just in terms of your first comments about the community use plan, that was something that I picked up myself looking at the report, because there hasn't been, I think Amy will agree, there hasn't been the detail there, and we do need that detail, and I think that will come out as part of the process. It is one of the part of the recommendation. I mean, from my point of view, I think my understanding is that some of the sports facilities at Moulton Sports Community Sports Centre are over capacity, and I think if we can agree a community use plan, that would be very welcome to some of the local sports teams, that it can be used for the community as well. And I think that is absolutely essential, because it is public money we're spending on this project. So you know, I'm happy to give you my assurance that I'll also be asking very much for that. So, Councillor Paul Andrews, can we make this the last one? I'm very aware time is moving on, and we have given this a good airing.
It's a very short point, Chair. As Councillor Doctor made that request to take money away from the Milton Rooms without realising that fund money was available, now that she knows that money is available and that there is loads of money to distribute to all the other areas of Ryedale, would she kindly consider, particularly as she's now a trustee of the Milton Rooms, supporting that £160,000 coming? There's a report for the £160,000 coming to the next Policy and Resources Committee.
I think, to be honest,
absolutely not.
To be honest, Councillor Andrews, I think that's an unfair question just to throw at Councillor Docker at this meeting.
Absolutely not. You can try again, but it'll still be no.
We will revisit that question, no doubt. Very quick, Councillor Clark. So you think you're the only person who hasn't?
I think I am the only person who hasn't spoken. I just want to say that I'm pretty supportive of what's been said so far about this, and it would seem logical for Ryedale School to be looking at whether they were something similar.
Yes. I think we've said that there may be other proposals that will come forward, but this is the one we have before us this evening. I'm very supportive of it. I think the report illustrates really well that it's been quite damaging to the welfare of the young people at the school, not having a functioning AstroTurf available to them, and I think we should as a council be encouraging them, as I think several other people have said, to take part in sport as much as possible. So I hope members will support this this proposal. Can we take it to the vote now, please, members? I'm happy to propose it from the chair. Do I have a seconder, please? Half a dozen people. Everybody's saying it, so that looks good. I don't know quite who got there first, to be honest. Did you catch one? Okay, so those in favour of the recommendations on page 123, please show.
Sorry, Chair.
Oh, sorry.
We're actually after advising whether sport.
Yeah, sorry, yes, I should have made that clear. But in the recommendation, obviously this is a recommendation to council. It's not a decision that this committee can make. But I think that is clear in the recommendations. Yeah.
We've recommended to council to
recommend
to
to council.
approve. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, we've advised council to
to
recommend to North Yorkshire to approve, I suppose. Yeah.
As it says in the recommendation. So I think that was unanimous. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Sorry, unfortunately, I've got a problem and I've got to go. So my apologies. I'm going to walk out, but for no other reason than I've got a bit of an issue.
That's absolutely fine, Councillor Dockery. Thank you for your contribution this evening. Hope everything's okay. So, moving on to item 16, council performance for Q4. And Lynn, I believe, is going to present this report to us. Thank you, Lynn.
Good evening, everyone. The purpose of this report is to provide details of the Council's performance against the strategic objectives of the Council plan throughout Q4 of the current financial year. Q4 has seen very similar challenges to those in Q3, with increasing numbers of new cases of COVID-19 when most restrictions came to an end, some further disruption caused by various severe weather conditions, and the continuing impact of LGR on capacity and resources. So all of these factors have affected staffing levels in one way or another. However, overall, the Q4 report is a good result in terms of performance up to the end of the reporting year. In comparison to Q3, the number of KPIs showing a green status has increased by 1. There's the same number of those at an amber status, but more importantly, there are no key performance indicators showing a red status. This reflects the significant progress made in the percentage of processing standard searches within 10 working days, which has moved to an amber status after having been at a red status throughout all of the previous quarters during the financial year 2021-22. Amber indicators are useful in helping to highlight areas which need to be looked at to make sure they don't fall into the red status. And the KPIs at amber status in Q4 have all been followed up to identify where improvements can be made. Those in the amber status category are due to various factors, including an increase in bulky waste collections and residual waste tonnes collected, the impact of the winter period on waste collection services, and extensions of time for processing minor and other planning applications. All those at an amber status are only just falling short of the targets, and for the reasons given in the report, all amber KPIs are expected to improve moving forward into the next quarter of 2022-23. Progress against the Council plan has been made across all of the corporate priorities, but just to mention a few, there's plenty of activity and progress around preventing homelessness, supporting communities and creative industries, promoting businesses, providing new affordable housing, and initiatives around sustainable homes and carbon neutral and energy efficient actions. Particular success stories included in the report are the excellent achievements of Community Enforcement Officer Martin Barker winning a national award from the environmental charity Keep Britain Tidy, and the Ryedale Fuel Poverty Alleviation Project winning the Energy Management Project of the Year award at the Sustainability Leaders Awards. In conclusion, with 67% of KPIs at a green status, 33% at an amber status, and none at the red status, the Q4 report demonstrates a very good result for the end of the reporting year 2021-22. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you very much for that. It's very good to receive this report, and it's very good to see the progress that has been made. As the year has progressed, we've moved away from having any red flags, and that is a tribute, I think, to the very hard-working team we have at Ryedale, who have continued to work hard in very, very difficult circumstances and continue to do that, not only with COVID, appalling weather at some point in the year, but also the pressures, the growing pressures around local government reorganisation. So I think it's a credit to our team at Ryedale that these performance indicators are coming out so well and continue to progress. So well done to all the team, I think, at Ryedale for that. Does anybody have any questions for Lynn? I'm not sure who I got first. Oh, right, OK. Does anybody have any questions? Councillor Burris, is there a question?
It will be.
Thank you.
First of all, Lynn, I'd like to say that you've done a great job, and from coming back into Ryedale, I think that your work is really good, what you've done, and I think that we all see that, you know, you're pushing forward and moving everything forward. And so I think from all of us, for you and your team and everybody, you know, you're doing such a good job. It's been such a difficult year for everybody, and we know how hard you've tried. What I would like to ask is, what are the measures when you think that maybe we could get over that sort of 75%, you know, into rather than just being sort of slightly lower? How do you think, what are the timelines that you think you might move us up into, say, 75%?
I think that's quite difficult to say, but I think moving into the next quarter, obviously the weather will improve significantly. Yeah. Therefore, at least one of the indicators in there now is expected to change. I think, you know, the other couple of amber indicators in the planning areas are there because, you know, that's the idea of an amber status is to flag up any areas so that we can perhaps look at, you know, whether we need to revisit any processing arrangements that we've got, perhaps any training needs, anything like that. So, you know, it's difficult to kind of put a timeline on it, but we have made significant progress across the year, you know, moving from just that one red status, and we haven't got any now. And we are in the process of reviewing, you know, the performance framework so that we can look at, kind of revisit whether or not we're actually evidencing the KPIs that we need to show the progress in delivering the priorities in the council plan.
Thank you. It's good to know that you've got a handle on it. Yeah, it's great. Thank you.
Do we have any further questions for Lynn? No. The other thing I was going to report to members is that I did have the pleasure of visiting the new, and I keep getting this wrong, I keep calling it the Old Railway Tavern, and is it Bay House? Last week or the week before, to look at the new affordable housing units in there. And I just can only say that it's an absolutely excellent scheme. It's provided some great accommodation for people in our community who need it, for people moving on from sort of supported living, I suppose you would call it, into more independent living. And it's also, as a member of Norton Town Council and Norton member, it's tidied up a dreadfully messy, horrible building in Norton. But the key thing is the provision of that extra housing in an area where we've been short for quite some time. So, and yes, thanks, and a lot of praise really for Kim and for Leslie, who have brought that scheme forward to a successful conclusion. Councillor Joy Andrews.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you to Ryedale District Council, and it isn't in actually any of this, but on the environmental side, and we have as do quite a few towns in Ryedale, have the give or take days that have been proved to be really popular. If anybody's been to the Memorial Hall, it's quite a big area, and it's always full of stuff. They bring it the night. I always worry that nobody's going to bring anything, and then the next morning I was worried nobody's going to come and take any of it away. And Street Scene come on the Sundays and collect very little stuff, because most of it's gone. It's helping the environment, it's recycling at its best, and I'd just like to thank Ryedale for supporting that through financially renting the room and for sending Street Scene to collect and dispose of what's left, which isn't a lot. So thank you very much. I just wanted to say something nice for a change. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews.
Lovely.
Thank you. Do we have any further comments, or? I don't think so. This report is for noting, so I think we can agree we'll note it. And thank you very much, Lynn, for your report. So moving forward, that concludes the Part B items. The next few items are to receive committee level decisions made under urgency powers as required under the Constitution. So these...
An outcome-based contract on that one.
Are you able to answer that?
Yeah, I'm not sure I can entirely answer that, Councillor Andrews. What I would say, obviously, public convenience clearly important to the district, to the council, to our communities. So we're working hard on that. And maybe not directly answering the question, but one of the reasons we brought an urgency decision forward was there was an increased need for budget, because we're now looking to clean the toilets twice a day in many cases, just to improve that level of cleanliness. So that possibly doesn't directly answer the question, but just give you some assurance that it is really important to us, and we're working hard to make sure we maintain very high standards.
I'm not suggesting that we should lower our standards, but perhaps we could have a chat afterwards.
Yeah, okay. I think, as I said, I think these are just for members to note rather than to enter into debate on. So I think we'll move further. We'll move on. So our next item, item 20, is an exempt, potentially an exempt item. We need to vote on exempt at this point. I'm happy to propose exempt from the chair because of the nature of the discussion. Do I have a seconder for that, please? I think that was Councillor Andrews. Okay. Whoever wants to argue over it. So, have you got a question, Councillor Andrews? Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm assuming members, having read the papers, will understand why we're proposing exempt. So can we take that to the vote, please? All those in favour, please show. Anyone against? No? Don't think so. I think that was unanimous. Is there a problem? Yeah, no, I'm going to do that, yeah. Okay, so I think we voted on that, so can we stop the live stream now, please? Because this is an exempt item.